News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users. I'm your host, Gary Baumgarten, and now on iTunes, on demand on iTunes as well. Why am I speaking so slowly? Well, in this business, it's called stretching. Why am I stretching? Because our guest isn't answering his phone. I mean, can you believe this? We just talked to him a half an hour ago, and he said, yeah, he'd be ready to go at 5 o'clock. We're hoping that Richard Landes, the Boston University professor who claims a video of a child killed by the Israeli Defense Forces was fabricated, will join us. The last time that Richard Landes was going to be with us about this subject, we had technical problems. So we went on and discussed it without him. And now we've agreed to bring him back on the show, and he's with us. All right, excellent. Okay, well, Richard Landes is a Boston University professor. Here's the deal. I guess it was, 7 years ago, I believe, that a Palestinian videographer videotaped what purported to be the killing of a Palestinian boy by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. This guy was a stringer, a freelancer who worked for CNN and France 2 television networks. He went to CNN with the videotape. CNN, for whatever reason, elected to not purchase it from him. He then went to France 2. France 2 purchased and published the videotape. It so enraged the Arab world, and more importantly, more specifically, the Palestinian community, that the intifada that Israel is suffering attacks from now to this day was sparked. And any chance of a peace process seemed to have been taken away. Now, why is it in the news today, so many years later? It's because the head of a French media group, a media watchdog group, published on his website the allegations that the videotape was fabricated, and without looking at the full videotape, just the portion that was aired by France 2 television, a jury convicted the gentleman of the Media Watch Group in France of libel. He is now appealing that, and Richard Landes, the Boston University professor who studied the videotape and who agrees that it was fabricated, is to fly to Paris to testify on behalf of the head of the Media Watch Group to tell the court that indeed this was a faked videotape. So Richard Landes, welcome to News Talk Online on Paltalk.com.
All right, thank you very much.
So did I get that right? My synopsis is fairly accurate about what led us to today?
By and large, you got it right. The difference is that I already flew to Paris at the initial trial, the defamation trial, in which he was found guilty. I already flew in then to give my testimony about my opinion and about the France 2 rushes that are now going to be shown and so on. This time I'm going there just to make sure that France 2 hasn't done what was her name, Rosemary something, who cut the 8 minutes out of the tape, the Nixon tapes?
Very good.
Yeah, so because I've seen them 3 times, I'm the only sort of non-France 2 insider who's seen the tapes 3 times. So there are a couple of scenes in particular that are really embarrassing. There's one scene where a guy, grabs his leg as if he's been shot in the leg, and little kids come around him, but no big people. And you're not going to get carried past the cameras by little kids. So he shoos the kids away, looks around, realizes nobody's coming to get him, and walks away without a limb. So like that are literally comic. And I'll be there to make sure that France 2 hasn't cut the stuff that makes them look really bad. Because basically what I did the movie Pallywood, and basically the term Pallywood, Palestinian Hollywood, and the realization that this was a sort of industry of staging these scenes of Palestinian victimization and Israeli aggression was actually a full-time industry, was after I saw these tapes that are now going to be shown in the French court on November 14th.
And that's a very important point. This is not one isolated incident. We saw other examples of I remember one where the guy was on the stretcher. They were rushing him on a stretcher to an ambulance. I don't know whether he was wounded or mortally wounded. I don't know. And somebody stumbled and they tipped the stretcher, and the guy fell and got up and ran away.
Actually, that scene was a burial scene. This was part of the Jenin libel about how the Israelis had massacred 500 people. So if there are 500 people killed, well, where's the burials? So they actually staged fake burials. And this guy's actually being carried on a bier in a winding sheet to the burial place. And he falls off the bier and gets back on twice, not once, twice. We have it in Hollywood as well. So yeah, no, this is an industry. This is an everyday occurrence. And the shocking thing, the thing that really blew my mind, and I said this to the judges last year at the trial, and it at least got a raised eyebrow, but it made no deep impression, was that I'm looking at these tapes with Charles Andelin, and there's one fake scene after another. And at the scene that I described about the guy with the shot in the leg, there was another person there watching it with us, and he laughed. I said, "Why'd you laugh?" He said, "Well, you know, I mean, it seems staged." And I said, "Yeah, it all seems staged." At which point, and this was the real revelation for me, Andelin, the journalist who put this out and who has sued Carsanti for libel for having the nerve to criticize him, said, "Oh yeah, they do that all the time. It's a cultural thing." So what you
okay. Look, I understand that they are trying to propagandize and they are trying to get their point of view across. I understand all that. What I don't understand, Richard Landes, is these guys who purport to be videographers, journalists, and then a national news network such as France 2, which is owned by the French government, publishes this to the detriment of the Israelis. I mean, don't you think that there ought to be some kind of a vetting process here?
When we did Pallywood, we did it with Bob Simon's footage. In other words, this isn't just France 2. France 2 is just the most egregious example of this. But I would say that across the boards, BBC, CNN, Reuters, AP, all of these guys give these cameras to Palestinian cameramen, and their job is to get the most realistic footage they can. And then, so you have to understand the cameramen, and this is something that Western journalists, for politically correct reasons, won't admit. Palestinian journalists consider themselves as part of the war effort. They are not in it to do journalism, they are in it to do propaganda. And so these guys, you know, Talal Abu Rahmeh is part of a Palestinian Journalist Guild that has literally issued threats against Palestinians who show Palestinian journalists who show the Palestinians in a bad light. I mean, it's a little like the Turks saying, we're not going to admit that it's genocide because that's an attack on Turkey's honor. So it's a completely different culture. The real scandal is the Western media laundering this stuff and presenting it as news. And there is not one Arab, Muslim, or Palestinian that you will talk with who will talk about Mohammed al-Dura who won't say the whole world saw it. It was terribly important that this not be something that Talal came up with and that just circulated in Palestinian circles. It was terribly important that this be ratified as a real event by a news media which is inexcusably incompetent. And
I guess as Richard Landes, he's the Boston University professor who has viewed the videotape of the IDF supposedly killing a Palestinian kid. It's so